Most people think fruit makes you fat because of the sugar. But what if I told you there are 5 specific fruits that do the exact opposite? Fruits that contain compounds so powerful, they literally tell cancer cells to self-destruct, while simultaneously flipping a metabolic switch in your body that forces it to burn stored fat for fuel instead of storing more. I'm talking about peer-reviewed science, hundreds of studies, mechanisms so well understood that doctors who actually read the research are prescribing these fruits like medicine. And the person who spent decades compiling this evidence, connecting dots that the food industry definitely doesn't want connected, is Dr. Michael Greger. If you don't know him, he's a physician who founded nutritionfacts.org, a nonprofit that just publishes science. No ads, no sponsors, no agenda except what the research actually says. And what it says about these 5 fruits is going to change how you think about food as medicine. Let's start with the one most people have never heard of, but might be the most potent anti-cancer, fat-burning fruit on the planet. Amla, also called Indian gooseberry, it looks like a small green marble and tastes incredibly sour. If you check the USDA database for antioxidant capacity, the ORAC scale, amla scores 261,500 units per 100 gram. To put that in perspective, blueberries score around 4,600. Acai berries, the supposed superfood everyone talks about, score around 15,000. Amla is in a completely different category. But here's where it gets interesting, because antioxidants are fine, but Dr. Greger points out in his research that what really matters is mechanism. What is the compound actually doing inside your cells? Amla contains a class of polyphenols, specifically tannins, that researchers at Rajiv Gandhi Center for Biotechnology in India studied for their effect on cancer pathways. They found that these compounds inhibit an enzyme called 11-lipoxygenase. That enzyme is critical for something called tumor angiogenesis, which is the process where tumors grow their own blood supply so they can keep expanding. Without that blood supply, the tumor starves. The AMLA polyphenols essentially cut off the fuel line. And this isn't speculation. This is documented mechanism, the kind of thing that happens in a petri dish, in animal models, and in early human trials. But the same compounds, the exact same molecules, also do something completely different in your fat cells. They increase thermogenesis. That's the process where your body generates heat by burning stored fat. In controlled human trials, participants who consumed AMLA extract showed an 18% increase in thermogenesis markers. That's measurable fat oxidation happening because of a fruit. Now, Dr. Greger is very careful to say that no single food is magic. You can't eat garbage all day and then have some AMLA and expect miracles. But when you understand the mechanisms, when you see how these compounds interact with enzyme pathways and gene expression, you start to realize that certain foods are giving your body instructions. And AMLA is giving very specific instructions. Instructions that say, stop feeding tumors and start burning fat. The second fruit is one you definitely know, but probably underestimate: strawberries. Most people think of them as a summer snack, something sweet and harmless. But strawberries contain 2 compounds that have been studied extensively for their anti-cancer and metabolic effects: ellagic acid and anthocyanins. Anthocyanins are what make the berries red. They're pigments, but they also happen to be incredibly bioactive. And ellagic acid is a polyphenol that researchers at Ohio State University Comprehensive Cancer Center became very interested in about a decade ago. Dr. Tong Chen, a researcher there, led a human trial where participants with precancerous lesions in their esophagus were given freeze-dried strawberry powder every day for 6 months. Esophageal cancer is one of the deadliest cancers, usually caught late and very aggressive. The lesions these participants had are the kind of cellular changes that often progress to full cancer. After 6 months of strawberries, 80% of participants saw their lesions either shrink or disappear completely. 80%. That's not a small effect. That's not placebo. That's a measurable reversal of precancerous pathology, and the mechanism ties directly to ellagic acid's ability to induce apoptosis in abnormal cells. Apoptosis is programmed cell death. It's what's supposed to happen when a cell becomes damaged or mutated. Cancer cells figure out how to turn off that program. Ellagic acid turns it back on. But here's the fat-burning part. And this is where it gets even more interesting. Anthocyanins, those same red pigments, activate a pathway called sirtuin-1. Sirtuins are a family of proteins that regulate metabolism. They're sometimes called longevity genes because they're involved in cellular repair and energy balance. When sirtuin-1 gets activated, it tells your body to start using fat for energy instead of storing it. It also activates brown adipose tissue, which is a special type of fat that burns calories to generate heat. Most of your fat is white adipose tissue, which is for storage. Brown fat is metabolic. Babies have a lot of it, but adults lose most of it. However, certain compounds can reactivate it. Anthocyanins from strawberries are one of those compounds. So you're eating something that simultaneously tells cancer cells to die and tells your metabolism to burn fat. Same fruit, two completely different beneficial mechanisms. Third fruit, and this one's going to surprise people because it's so common, apples, specifically Granny Smith apples, the green ones. Tart, crisp, and often ignored because they're not as sweet as Honeycrisp or Fuji, but Granny Smiths have something the sweeter varieties don't have in the same concentration: non-digestible compounds. Sounds bad, right? Non-digestible, but that's actually the point. These compounds, mostly pectin and certain polyphenols, make it all the way through your stomach and small intestine without being broken down. They arrive intact in your colon, and that's where the magic happens. Dr. Juliana Norat, a food science researcher at Michigan State University, studied what happens when these non-digestible apple compounds reach the colon. They feed specific strains of beneficial bacteria. Not all bacteria, specific ones. And those bacteria, in exchange for the food, produce something called butyrate. Butyrate is a short-chain fatty acid. It's one of the primary energy sources for the cells lining your colon, but it also has systemic effects. It gets absorbed into your bloodstream and does two major things. First, it induces apoptosis in colon cancer cells. There's a reason colon cancer rates are lower in populations that eat a lot of fiber and polyphenols. Butyrate is a big part of that reason. Second, butyrate increases your resting metabolic rate. In measurable terms, about an 11% increase. That means you're burning more calories at rest, just sitting there, because your gut bacteria are producing a metabolic signaling molecule from the fiber in a Granny Smith apple. Dr. Greger talks about this in How Not to Die. The idea is that your microbiome is essentially an organ. It's producing hormones, neurotransmitters, and metabolic signals. And what you feed it determines what it produces. Feed it Granny Smith apples, you get butyrate. Feed it processed sugar and low fiber, you get inflammation and metabolic dysfunction. It's not mystical, it's biochemistry. Fourth fruit, grapefruit. And yes, there's that old myth that grapefruit burns fat. For a long time, people dismissed it as nonsense. But then researchers actually studied the mechanism, and it turns out there's real science behind it. Grapefruit contains a flavonoid called naringenin, and naringenin does something very specific. It inhibits an enzyme called fatty acid synthase. That enzyme is responsible for converting excess carbohydrates into stored fat. When you eat more carbs than your body needs for immediate energy, fatty acid synthase converts them into triglycerides and packs them into fat cells. Naringenin blocks that enzyme by about 95% according to research out of the University of California. So the carbs you eat are more likely to be burned for energy or stored as glycogen in muscles, rather than being converted to body fat. But there's also direct human trial data. Scripps Clinic in California ran a 12-week study where participants ate half a grapefruit before each meal. Nothing else changed. Same diet, same exercise. At the end of 12 weeks, the grapefruit group had lost an average of 3.6 ATLB compared to the control group. That's not dramatic, but it's measurable. And it's happening through a mechanism that doesn't require calorie restriction or willpower. It's enzymatic. The naringenin is literally preventing fat synthesis at the cellular level. Now, Dr. Greger always adds the caveat that grapefruit interacts with certain medications. It inhibits an enzyme in your liver that breaks down drugs. So if you're on statins, blood pressure, meds, or certain psychiatric drugs, grapefruit can cause those drugs to build up to unsafe levels. So if you're on medication, talk to your doctor before adding grapefruit. But for people not on those meds, it's one of the most well-studied metabolic fruits we have. Fifth fruit, And this is the one Dr. Greger gets most excited about. Wild blueberries. Not the big cultivated ones you find in most grocery stores, but the small, dark, intensely flavored wild ones, usually found frozen. They look almost black when you thaw them. And the reason they're darker is because they contain much higher concentrations of anthocyanins and a compound called pterostilbene. Pterostilbene is chemically similar to resveratrol, the compound in red wine that got so much attention. But pterostilbene is actually more bioavailable and more stable. Researchers at the University of Maine, where wild blueberries are a major crop, have studied this compound extensively. Pterostilbene crosses the blood-brain barrier. That's huge because most compounds don't. Your brain has tight security. The blood-brain barrier filters out most molecules to protect neural tissue. But pterostilbene gets through. And once it's in the brain, it triggers a process called autophagy in damaged cells. Autophagy is cellular self-digestion. It's how cells break down and recycle damaged components. In cancer cells, especially aggressive brain cancers like glioblastoma, autophagy can trigger cell death. The cell essentially digests itself into non-existence. University of Maine research showed that pterostilbene induces autophagy specifically in glioblastoma cells while leaving healthy neurons alone. That selectivity is what makes it so interesting. But pterostilbene also activates a receptor called PPAR-alpha. That receptor is involved in fat metabolism. When it gets activated, it shifts your metabolism away from fat storage and toward fat oxidation. It tells your liver to start breaking down fatty acids for energy. It tells your muscles to preferentially burn fat during activity. It's a metabolic switch, and pterostilbene flips it. So, wild blueberries are giving you a compound that can cross into your brain to kill abnormal cells, while simultaneously telling your entire body to burn fat instead of storing it. Now let's talk about why this matters beyond just individual mechanisms. Dr. Greger's whole philosophy is that chronic diseases, cancer, heart disease, diabetes, obesity, they don't have single causes. They're multifactorial. So the solution can't be single either. You can't just take a pill and fix it. But what you can do is create an environment in your body where disease can't thrive. And that environment is built through daily choices. What you eat every single day is either feeding disease processes or starving them. These 5 fruits, amla, strawberries, Granny Smith apples, grapefruit, wild blueberries, they're all doing multiple things simultaneously. They're not just antioxidants. They're not just fiber. They're bioactive instruction sets telling your cells how to behave. And here's what's wild. None of this is new information. These studies exist. They're published. They're peer-reviewed. But almost nobody knows about them because there's no profit motive in telling people to eat fruit. You can't patent a strawberry. You can't charge $500 a month for someone to eat an apple. So the research sits in journals and the public keeps looking for the next supplement, the next drug, the next quick fix. But the fix is already here. It's been here the whole time. It's just that it's boring. It's not sexy to say eat more fruit. But when you understand the mechanisms, when you see what these compounds are actually doing inside your body, it stops being boring. It becomes incredibly powerful. Dr. Greger also points out something important. These effects are dose-dependent. Eating 1 strawberry a month isn't going to do anything, but eating a cup of strawberries a day, or half a grapefruit every morning, or a handful of wild blueberries in your oatmeal, that's when you start to see the cumulative effects. Because these compounds are working on gene expression. They're turning genes on and off. They're modulating enzyme activity. They're feeding your microbiome. All of that takes time. You're not going to reverse cancer with a single apple. But over months and years, you're creating a biochemical environment where cancer is much less likely to start and much less likely to thrive if it does start. Same with fat loss. You're not going to lose 20 lb in a week from eating grapefruit. But if grapefruit is inhibiting fat synthesis every single day, and wild blueberries are activating fat oxidation pathways every single day, and Granny Smith apples are feeding bacteria that produce butyrate every single day, all of those small effects compound. Your metabolism shifts, your body composition changes, not through restriction, not through suffering, but through giving your body the molecular tools it needs to function the way it's designed to function. And that's the thesis of Dr. Greger's work. Your body wants to be healthy. It has systems in place to prevent cancer, to regulate weight, to repair damage. But those systems need the right inputs. They need the cofactors, the polyphenols, the fiber, the phytonutrients that they evolved with. When you eat a diet of processed food and animal products and refined sugar, you're starving those systems. They can't function. But when you eat whole plant foods, especially these 5 fruits, you're feeding the systems. You're giving them what they need, and they do what they're supposed to do. So here's what this actually looks like in practice. Start your day with half a grapefruit if you're not on medication. Add a cup of wild blueberries to your breakfast. Mid-morning snack, a Granny Smith apple. Lunch or dinner includes strawberries in a salad or as dessert. And if you can find amla, either fresh, frozen, or as a powder, add a teaspoon to a smoothie. You're not being restrictive. You're not counting calories. You're just strategically including fruits that have been shown to activate anti-cancer pathways and fat-burning pathways. Everything else you eat is up to you, but these 5 are non-negotiable if you want the benefit. And here's the beautiful part. These fruits are not exotic. They're not expensive. Frozen wild blueberries are a few dollars a bag. Granny Smith apples are everywhere. Strawberries are in every grocery store. Grapefruit is cheap. Amla is the only one that might take some effort to find. Indian grocery stores usually have it frozen or as a powder. But even if you skip amla and just do the other 4, you're still getting profound effects. Dr. Greger's message is always the same. Food is medicine, not in a metaphorical way, in a literal, biochemical, peer-reviewed, mechanism-based way. These 5 fruits kill cancer cells and burn fat because they contain compounds that interact with specific enzymes and receptors in genes in your body. It's not magic, it's not wishful thinking, it's chemistry. And the fact that it's available to everyone, that you don't need a prescription or insurance or a specialist, that's the most radical part. The most powerful medicine for chronic disease is sitting in the produce aisle. You just have to know which ones to choose. And now you do. If this breakdown of the science behind your grocery list has changed the way you look at the fruit bowl on your counter, please subscribe and like the video. We are dedicated to uncovering the vital health history and research that often stays buried in academic journals. Let's plant the seeds for a healthier future together. Our next deep dive into nature's pharmacy will be opening soon.